Good morning. Welcome and thank you for joining our Capacity Building for Nonprofits webinar. I'd like to first thank our program sponsors, JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo, for their support. I'm Denise Cooper. I am an AmeriCorps VISTA. I am the program manager at the Collaborative and a doctoral student with the University of Miami. The Collaborative's mission is to close the wealth gap in North Carolina by ensuring that everyone has a pathway to prosperity. We have a few housekeeping announcements that we'd like to go through before we start the webinar. This webinar is being recorded. It is a group discussion. However, all webinar attendees are muted at the start to ensure sound quality. We do welcome your feedback. We'd like you to share comments in the chat section and to use the Q&A section for questions. I'll be managing that section for you and responding to you. And then also the participants and speakers in the webinar will respond to your questions. We want you to maximize your webinar experience. You don't need to be an expert to share your information in the chat. We're all here to learn from each other. So we welcome your questions and your insights. So please get comfortable, engage with us. And throughout the program, please be considering ways that an AmeriCorps VISTA can support your organization and add value. So our itinerary for today will start with some framework and some background regarding AmeriCorps VISTA, and we'll move into a discussion about the specifics of bringing a VISTA on board to serve at your site. Now, I'm going to turn it over to our guest facilitator, Maggie Woods, who will be leading today's discussion.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Denise, for that kind introduction. I'm really excited to be with you all this morning. So today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, VISTA, and specifically how VISTAs can build capacity for your organization and others around the state. But before I jump into the program, I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit and let you know why I was asked to be a guest facilitator this morning. So I work at the Institute for Emerging Issues at NC State. We are a public policy center focused on making North Carolina a more vibrant and economically prosperous state. And I have a whole range of experience working with AmeriCorps VISTA members. I myself served as an AmeriCorps VISTA back when I lived up in Manchester, New Hampshire. It's how I got my start in my career. And then at the Institute, we also run a VISTA program where we place VISTAs in organizations around the state to help build capacity. In addition to that, we also run a program called Service Year North Carolina, which aims to make a year of service a common expectation and opportunity for all young North Carolinians. And when I say a year of service, I mean programs like AmeriCorps VISTA. And so I live and breathe national service. This is just my favorite topic to talk about, and really excited to engage in this conversation today. So we're actually going to start the conversation by going to a poll. The poll is just to get a sense of how familiar you all are with AmeriCorps VISTA. So your options are: I am not at all familiar with this program, I've heard of AmeriCorps and have a general understanding about it, I am an AmeriCorps VISTA alum, I've hosted or managed an AmeriCorps VISTA, or other. And if you have other, if you could please type in the chat what that other looks like for you, just so that we have a better sense of what that looks like. So I'm seeing some come in, some answers come in, so we'll just give you a couple more moments, and let's close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. Awesome. All right. So it looks like most of you have some kind of understanding of what AmeriCorps VISTA is. We have one other and at least one person who's not at all familiar with the program, and that's perfectly fine. We're going to cover everything today. And so I'm really excited to get the conversation started with Marquita Robertson, who's the Executive Director of the Collaborative. So Marquita, could you just start by telling us a little bit more about the Collaborative and your connection with AmeriCorps?
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Maggie, for leading this call. I am so excited to be talking to you all today about one of my favorite programs at the Collaborative, the AmeriCorps VISTA program. The Collaborative has several different programs and initiatives to support our overall mission to address wealth inequities, and providing North Carolina nonprofits with a full-time paid VISTA for a year has been the most impactful. Last year, our VISTAs supported 1,100 adults in job placement programs, worked with 839 youth, and managed 1,250 additional community volunteers. And these are just a few of our VISTAs impact numbers. Here are some of our current partners, and all of these are North Carolina organizations currently hosting an AmeriCorps VISTA. This diagram illustrates how the Collaborative supports nonprofits in North Carolina hosting an AmeriCorps VISTA. As you can see, VISTA falls under AmeriCorps, and the Collaborative plays what we want to call an intermediary role. We coordinate with the regional state office to handle the application and the grant program administration for our organizations. Our member organizations that bring on the VISTAs are listed on this site as subsites, and these subsites are the organizations like you guys on the phone. And so while this organization demonstrates the organizational structure, it also shows how bringing on a VISTA can be very seamless and easy.
That's really great. I love this diagram, and I love the little clouds around the Collaborative and your organization. But Marquita, we keep asking, or we keep saying the word VISTA, and we haven't actually defined it yet. So could you tell us a little bit more, what is a VISTA?
So that's a good question, and a lot of people don't know this, but VISTA stands for Volunteers in Service to America. It's a mission-driven program, and it's designed to build capacity in nonprofits and communities working with the poor. The core principles center around moving communities out of poverty rather than making poverty more tolerable through what we define as short-term services. And they do this by engaging in the planning, development, and the implementation of the projects.
So you mentioned building capacity. What does capacity building mean?
Yes. VISTAs build capacity. If you haven't already heard this today or any other time from me, I talk about this a lot. So in short, VISTAs can do things like research and apply for new funding sources like grants or in-kind donations. They can recruit and train long-term volunteers. They can establish and cultivate new partnerships with donors, media, community stakeholders. They design and implement databases to track donors, to track volunteers. They create templates for outreach and event planning. And to be 100% transparent, the Collaborative VISTAs have built this webinar, this presentation, from the strategy through the email marketing, through putting together the presentation and running it right now. And we also had a VISTA introduce or welcome you guys at the beginning of the program. VISTAs do not do direct service. VISTA is not hiring a receptionist or an assistant. In other words, you won't bring on a VISTA to be a receptionist, but you can bring on a VISTA to help build out your program, develop the plan, and write the grants, etc. VISTAs won't be your counselor, but they can build capacity for your counseling and related programs by improving the efficiency in your education and counseling processes that would help folks or your clients manage their credit better, obtain and maintain home ownership, etc. So they can also do things like assist in researching for housing or credit counselors, or developing a counseling collaborative, but they can't be counselors. So that is how I describe or differentiate between capacity building and direct service.
Yeah, that's a really good description. And I feel like this is one of the core principles of VISTA. I always like to think of VISTAs as doing all the behind the scenes work, not necessarily see that a nonprofit does, but that's the really important work. They're doing all the behind the scenes, just not the direct service. So Marquita, you gave a really good overview of how your VISTAs in the collaborative program have impacted the state just in the last year, but how has VISTA historically impacted North Carolina?
So North Carolina Vistas and National Vistas have efficiently addressed challenges like education equity, disaster responses, community development in North Carolina. And to give you some real tangible examples of what Vistas do, we have Vistas now that are currently supporting the disaster loan recovery efforts. They are working at nonprofits that have been, since the start of COVID-19, have been making loans, bridge loans and disaster recovery loans for organizations and small businesses throughout North Carolina that have been hit extremely hard by COVID-19. Vistas also do things like build projects. Vistas have worked on Bank On in small locations in smaller cities and municipalities in North Carolina. And Vistas do it efficiently. They do it efficiently because Vistas, as we'll talk about later, are very modestly paid, and we receive great benefit from the work and the investments that Vistas do. And so it's a really, really awesome program if you think of your return on investment in terms of a Vista. The numbers at the bottom of this screen represent some of the impact AmeriCorps have had in North Carolina. You see that there are 800 sites in North Carolina and 4,300 members, and this is all of AmeriCorps. And look at the amount of funding from the government to provide AmeriCorps Vistas and the number of AmeriCorps Vistas scholarships that have been earned, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. So Vistas are making real impact right here in our state.
Yeah, I feel like AmeriCorps VISTA is just like the best kept secret in the state and nationally. As you kind of scratch the surface of an organization doing really impactful work, and you'll probably find an AmeriCorps VISTA. So we've talked about the impact that AmeriCorps VISTAs have on the state and on the community and organizations, but why, what are the benefits to the member themselves? Why would someone want to do this?
So I'm going to go back and echo or piggyback on what you said about Vistas being one of the best kept secrets. They absolutely are, and this goes both ways. This goes to the organizations themselves. Not a lot of organizations know about Vistas, and those that do know about Vistas aren't quite sure about how to participate in the program and are sometimes intimidated by the prospect of completing a federal application. And then you have a lot of folks that would be eligible to serve in the VISTA program that aren't sure about it. And so the collaborative is working with organizations like Maggie's Institute for Emerging Issues and others, and our partners to get the word out about the great opportunities on both sides for Vistas, for organizations and for potential Vistas themselves. So back to your question, Maggie, about VISTA member benefits. To serve as a VISTA is a tremendous sacrifice. And the VISTA living allowance is set at the area poverty level and only covers basic needs, which is why I shared earlier that they have a very modest pay allowance. And I share this and I stress this for several reasons. It's important for me and for other VISTA, prospective VISTAs, as we communicate with them about serving as a VISTA. I'm always clear with people interested in serving as VISTA with help with, this is what you'll get paid. Does this make sense for you? Because I don't want someone to jump into this if it doesn't make sense for them financially. And so it's very, very important to communicate. And unlike a job, I stress this with them. And if they're moving into the state or moving into the area, before we even start conversation, I ask them to check out housing. I want you to look for housing and to have a clear and concise plan in regards to, how you're gonna make this work. And I don't know the details, but I just want them to know, because what I don't want to happen is for someone to, say, okay, I'm gonna be a VISTA and serve at this site. And then when it's time to do it, they don't have housing because it's hard to find housing at the poverty level. And we all know that. And affordable housing is an issue for so many people. I also stress the modest pay because it's important as sites and as me as an the collaborative as an intermediary, when we interact with VISTAs, that we understand and appreciate the tremendous sacrifice that they're doing by serving as a VISTA. And just keeping that in mind and in our back pocket. With that said, there are some awesome benefits to serving as a VISTA, and some that are worth noting are the Education Award. And this award can be put towards past or future education expenses. There's healthcare benefits. There's a non-competitive advantage for federal jobs after serving. And there's also paid leave. So there are a lot of cool benefits. There's also childcare assistance too, for folks that have children that receive childcare.
Yeah, as a former VISTA or VISTA alum, one of the biggest learnings I had was how to live on a budget. And I will say that aside from VISTA propelling my career, it's something that I've taken with me in everything that I do is how to live on a budget. So thanks for stressing that. I also use the Education Award to pay for grad school. So it definitely offers some clear benefits. So Marquita, what are the eligibility requirements for an organization who wants to host an AmeriCorps VISTA? I think you're muted, Marquita.
Okay, sorry. In short, this is the #1 question. And so it's any nonprofit with work that supports low-income families. As long as they are bringing a VISTA on to do capacity building, any nonprofit is eligible to do this. And, a lot of folks ask that, a lot of folks don't know, and it's not limited to nonprofits too. It's local government agencies. There's a wide range of folks that are eligible for businesses, that are eligible for VISTA. It is not open to for-profit businesses, though. I want to note that. But outside of the realm of that, there's a lot of flexibility in who can bring in or host an AmeriCorps VISTA.
So if I'm eligible as an organization, what are the expectations of me as a host site for VISTAs?
So VISTAs need the support and guidance of a supervisor. And this is this should be obvious, but also has to be stated. Every VISTA is different. As I mentioned, some will be local recruits, some will be right from down the street, and some will come in to serve at your site in a small town in North Carolina from Wyoming or Utah or California. And so obviously, each VISTA has different varying needs that the site supervisor or someone there at your organization will need to support them through. The quality of the support that you provide your VISTAs with will determine the success of their experience. VISTA is a project or a program that the more you invest at the beginning, the better your returns will be at the end. So, and also more plainly, participating organizations handle the VISTA onboarding, the orientation, and the training. So we'll talk a little later about how the collaborative supports in this, but this onboarding refers to onboarding at your site. The site will have to acclimate the VISTA to the workings of the site. You're gonna have to show them where the printer is, where they sit, explain the culture and the policies and procedures of your site. The site will also need to provide workspace, supplies, and equipment for the VISTA. The site will also be responsible for supervising and providing guidance and support and coaching through the VISTA. VISTAs invest a lot, and in turn, it is wise for these sites to invest in them through guidance and support and mentoring, understanding what they want to get out of this project. It doesn't take a lot of time, but whenever we bring on a VISTA, I spend some time with them to get an idea about what they want. What do they want to gain for this? And I am very intentional with making that happen. A lot of times it's networking. They want to be out in the community and attend meetings and to get to know things. That is 90% of what the VISTAs want to know. And I'm very, very intentional about making that happen for them and supporting them throughout the process. And at the end of their service, towards the last 3 or 4 months, I am talking with them very intimately about what life like after VISTA looks like, encouraging them to make connections, encouraging them to use me as a reference and to talk with me about their plans, their future job prospects after VISTA. And this is also something that would be really awesome for sites to provide that for the VISTAs as well. The sites also monitor the VISTAs attendance and leave, and their attendance and their work hours should follow the hours of your organization or however you want to manage them. But that would be on your site, or the participating organization to manage that.
Marquita, I'm so glad that you highlighted the importance of having a strong supervisor at a host site because, like we mentioned, VISTAs are serving at poverty level. They are giving a full year of service to you and your organization. And so having that supervisor who can be there as a guide, as a support system, as a coach is really important and is one of the most important things that we look for in organizations that we place VISTAs in. So I appreciate you highlighting that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so we actually are going to do another poll to continue this conversation. And this is just a poll to help us get a better idea of what the needs are of your organization and how VISTA might support them. So the question is, what support do you anticipate needing to host an AmeriCorps VISTA? So the answers are getting started, managing another individual, finding space for another individual, executing knowledge transfer, or other. And if you have other, please type that into the chat box so we can get a better sense of what other kinds of support might be needed. So it looks like some answers are coming in. So let's just give it another moment or so, and we can close the poll in 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you. It looks like we're a little bit split. There's definitely some people who would need some support getting started, finding a space. A lot of, space can definitely be an issue for a lot of nonprofits, as well as executing knowledge transfer. So that's really helpful. Thank you all for answering that. So Marquita, since we're talking about support, how does the collaborative support sites in bringing on a VISTA?
So, and before I get into that, I also want to just say that I hear you, and I am not surprised at all that the number one concern would be getting started. And so I'll talk you through that just a bit, but I just want to, let you know that is very, very common. The collaborative is your very intimate partner through this process in getting started. We look very much like a staffing agency for VISTA. We handle all of the administration of the program from start to finish, as illustrated in the diagram at the beginning of the webinar. We provide overall project training and orient VISTAs and site supervisors. We provide professional development opportunities and support for the VISTAs. We secure the resources that are needed to make this transition as smooth as possible for our organizations. We manage the biweekly payroll information. We assist with recruiting, screening, interviewing, and selection of VISTA members. And just to be clear, our organizations select their VISTAs. The collaborative does not select VISTAs for your organization. What we will do is recruit and screen VISTAs and send them over and recommend some VISTAs for you alongside your own recruiting, where you can post this on your own organization's website, your own organization's Facebook, your own Indeed, and you can bring someone on that is not recommended by me, that you found through your independent search. So it doesn't matter. There are some organizations that are smaller that have a less robust recruitment strategy, and we help them a little more. We also have larger organizations that have an HR that take this on and recruit on their own. So we provide the services that you need, however you need them. Recruitment during COVID-19 has been a lot different than it has been in previous years. And for sites that don't have video capability, we have provided them with video capability to do video interviews with folks in lieu of having them come into the office. So we are very responsive and nimble in that needs. We do provide site visits where we come out to make sure that everything is okay with you and your VISTAs. And we communicate timelines and project information with our partners as well. So, and I mentioned that we're also very responsive to the needs of our partners. And an example of that is in March, when most of us, 99% of us, went from being in the office all day to working from home. This was a transition for us individually as organizations, and also a transition for VISTAs too. And so the collaborative came in and worked intimately with our partners to develop remote working strategies for VISTAs to support the managers in managing VISTAs remotely. And these are things that the collaborative does to make this opportunity as seamless and turnkey as possible for our sites.
Marquita, it's so important right now to be supporting VISTAs. So I'm really excited, and I'm taking notes to hear how you all are supporting VISTAs right now, because like the rest of us in the nonprofit and public service fields, we're all trying to figure out how to do our work as best as possible right now in what we're calling new normal, but is absolutely not normal at all. So I appreciate you explaining how you're supporting VISTAs and host sites right now. If an organization is interested in bringing on a VISTA, what is the time for that onboarding process?
So up on the screen, you have the typical AmeriCorps VISTA cycle. And so it starts in spring with VISTA recruitment, which is where we are now. I am recruiting for VISTAs, and we have a very rich talent pool at this time, and I am sharing these resumes and applications with sites that have already committed to bringing on a VISTA. VISTAs typically begin over the summertime, and that summertime ranges anywhere from June to September is when they begin. But the VISTAs start is not limited to the summertime. There are opportunities for VISTAs to start throughout the calendar year, but we just see a bulk of VISTAs starting in the summertime. And this works perfectly with recent graduates. The graduates graduate in May and are very interested in deciding what they want to do next, and many of them opt for VISTA and go through the process over the summer and start later in the summer or the fall. In the fall, we begin VISTA professional development with the collaborative, although this will likely training for VISTA begins as soon as they commit. The federal program provides online training. I provide training, and your site would also be acclimating them with your organization. And not for that to be intimidating, but that is simply the way that you typically bring your folks on board. If you were to have a new person to start, those same processes and knowledge transfer, we would expect that to happen with VISTAs as well. Over the winter time, I start reaching back out to our current partners to see what their thoughts are for continuing the work with AmeriCorps VISTA, and also start looking for new partners. And so our schedule, we are running just a tad behind in terms of recruiting new sites, only because of COVID-19 and some other things that happened earlier this year. But we are in the height of recruitment season. So anyone on this call that is interested in bringing on a VISTA for this year should get in touch with me to get more information or to move forward as soon as possible.
Yeah, and that really leads me into my next question. If there are people on this call who are really excited about me moving forward, what are the next steps for people?
So the next steps, as I said, is to get in touch with me so we can talk it through. And what we talk through is the specifics for your site. I'm sure you guys still have a host of additional questions and what does it look like for VISTA and how can we make it work. And then we enter into an MOU. And after we do the MOU, we develop a job description for the VISTA, which AmeriCorps refers to as a VAD. And we recruit and hire for the position. All of the supervisors are trained, and the training is online or in this format in a Zoom call for about an hour. And we walk through the specifics of VISTA unique to your site, and then the VISTAs start. It's also important, probably obvious for most, but I want to note it to note this is that when, if you decide to bring on a VISTA, when the VISTAs start, let your organization know who the VISTAs are. We do have VISTAs that come on board and no one knows who they are. And so, just be clear about who the VISTAs are and, what they're doing and that sort of thing. And the next step after that would be VISTA service to, supervise your VISTA, support your VISTA, and move forward in your projects.
Yeah, it's so important that point about knowing, making sure people know who the VISTAs are, particularly right now if VISTAs are starting virtually, making sure that they're able to connect with team members. It's an increased challenge, but really important. So this was a really interesting and enlightening conversation, and now is really the time for Q&A with all of you. So if you do have a question, I saw Denise typed in the chat box, please type in your question for us. And as those questions come in, we do have some questions that were uplifted during the registration process. So we'll kind of start with some of those questions and then jump in on any questions that you all have as a group. But Marquita, one of the questions was, can host organizations share a VISTA's weekly hours and cost with another organization? So can it be shared between two organizations?
So that was a very unique question. At first, I need to do a little bit more. I need to do a little bit more research on that. At first thought, I want to say no, but I know that there is so much flexibility in AmeriCorps that I need to know more about the organization and what the plans are and how they wanted to execute this. And I'm not sure who asked that, but if this is something that someone on this call is interested in, email me separately so we can talk through how this would make sense and how we could make this work.
Yeah, and it's a good point about how there is some real flexibility in AmeriCorps, and we all work really closely with our program officers in AmeriCorps to kind of navigate some of those complexities. So, so that's a great answer. So we are getting some questions in the chat. One, Joan asks, hang on, it was just here. Explain how re-enlistment in the VISTA program works.
If someone wants to re-enlist, and Joanne is one of our current VISTAs, so if Joanne is interested in re-enlisting, she would just talk to me about it.
Awesome. And we've had VISTAs re-enlist as well.
Yeah. We, one of our VISTAs on this call that is behind the scenes managing this will be re-enlisting, and I have another one in Asheville that will be re-enlisting, and some last year that re-enlisted for this year. So it's very common for VISTAs to get very attached with their work and not be ready to leave and ready to see and wanting to see their project through. A lot of VISTAs also, if the organization has capacity, are brought on to work at their host sites. So great question.
Yeah, I was actually on a VISTA call with our VISTA team right before this webinar, and we had that exact question. We were talking about how common it is for VISTAs to want to stay, not feeling like they're just getting into the work when they finish their year and wanting to continue that and see it to sustainability. So that's great. Charles is also asking in the chat, does a nonprofit have to provide the VISTA a place to stay?
No, you do not have to provide the VISTA a place to stay. And I brought that up about housing early on because if someone is relocating to the area, they likely don't understand the housing landscape of that area. So what I encourage the sites to do is to connect them with housing resources, or, you know, at least prompt them to get a better understanding of housing before they come. But they don't have to do that. Some sites do provide housing, a housing allowance that is paid to either the landlord or to the mortgage holder. And that is something that you can do. We encourage you to do that, especially if you have the funding, but is not necessary. So no, you don't have to provide housing.
Great. And as a follow-up, how does the VISTA get paid? It's a good question.
So the VISTA is paid via direct deposit, but specifically the details of that, the collaborative coordinates with the federal government and gets the VISTAs paid. Payroll is not anything that our sites or our partner organizations have to be involved with. A VISTA may come to you early on and say, hey, I've got a question about my pay. And at that time, you would say, you need to contact Marquita. And I would take it from there. So I handle all of the payroll administration.
Is it too late to get a VISTA for this calendar year through this program?
Absolutely not. If you're interested in a VISTA, email me today so we can talk through what this looks like and, you know, move forward in securing a VISTA for you. It's not too late, but we're at the time where if you're interested, you need to start taking some action now.
That's great. Thank you all for your questions, and please add more as we kind of continue this. I want to get back to some of the questions that were asked during registration. So you mentioned this, but sometimes it's good to hear the process again. Do you interview your own VISTAs beforehand, or are VISTAs just selected and placed in your organization? How does that work?
No, so each site chooses and selects their own VISTA. I make recommendations, and the recommendations that I I have screened. I have interviewed them, usually a video interview, even before COVID-19. I have interviewed them and thought that they would be potentially good candidates for your organization, and I'll recommend them to you. They're also geographically placed, or my recommendations are also geographical. So if I send you someone and you are located in Winston-Salem, the folks that I send you are going to be in Winston-Salem. And this is important because AmeriCorps is a federal program, a national program, I should say. And we often have people applying from all over. And so when I talk with someone and I send them to you, it's not to waste your time. If I send them to you, I think it's someone that you should consider. And if you take my recommendations, that's fine. But you ultimately have to make the decision on whether or not you want someone. I do not select VISTAs for organizations.
That's great. And I just want to note that Denise put Marquita's email in the chat. So if you are interested in bringing on a VISTA right now or have further questions after this, you can reach out to her directly. So Marquita, another question that was raised is, how many VISTAs can an organization have?
There really isn't a limit to how many VISTAs that you can have per se, but it's more so of how many VISTAs can you handle or manage. And, you know, that's just something to consider. And a new site, someone that is interested in getting a VISTA, I wouldn't recommend you bringing on 5 VISTAs at this time, especially without going through at least one cycle to get an idea of what it's like. And so, you know, there is no limit, but, you know, just want to make sure that, you know, you have the bandwidth and the capacity to support the numbers that you're bringing on.
Yeah. And what about the cost? What does the cost share look like to participate in this program?
So the cost share, the federal government provides some support with AmeriCorps VISTA, and the collaborative as an organization also pays or has a cost share that we pay the federal government to participate in this. And so that cost share is divided among our sites, and it can vary from year to year, from project to project, based off of how many VISTAs that you have. And so as we move forward in the process, that you know, we can talk a little more and you can get some more concrete information about the cost share. But great question.
Great. And Chester just wrote in the chat that he just emailed you. He's really interested in bringing on a VISTA and that he himself is a VISTA alum. So that's fabulous. Love to connect with other VISTA alums. Me too, Chester.
Looking forward to talking with you, Chester.
So Marquita, this is kind of a specific question, but one of the questions that came in from registration is, can AmeriCorps members participate in housing counseling? Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, so just looking at the question, I just want to be clear that, you know, housing counseling, as I know, it sounds very direct service. And so while VISTAs don't provide direct service, a VISTA can, and we kind of walked through this a little bit earlier, you know, a VISTA can help to develop a housing counseling program. They can put together a housing counseling coalition. VISTAs can audit and evaluate and make recommendations on your housing counseling processes. They can develop a housing counseling platform and that sort of thing. And so, you know, on the face, like, can a VISTA sit down with clients and do this? I am going to say, as I know it, not in that capacity, but there are ways for VISTAs to support housing counseling.
Great. And that's probably something that if people had specific questions, they should get in touch and talk to you about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so if you're up here and you have housing counseling, let's talk about that, because there are ways to make it work. But I just want to, you know, we just need to talk through what that looks like for your site. So yeah, please reach out to me and let's talk this through.
Great. This was sort of already discussed in the presentation. You had a great slide about it, but I'm wondering if you could offer a little bit more thoughts on what the onboarding process looks like for an organization. I think there were some questions about that during the registration.
Yeah, so onboarding for the VISTA looks a lot like if you're bringing a new employee on to your organization. You want them to know your organization geographically and also culturally. You want them to know and understand your organization, and also the background and the history of your organization. So however or whatever that process is that you currently have is what you want to extend to VISTAs. Now, I also, I am the executive director of a nonprofit, so I know that some of these things we don't currently have in place on how to, you know, we might not have like onboarding procedures in place. And so I'll work with you to identify, you know, important things that you want to make sure that you share and that you communicate with your VISTA. And so that's one part of the onboarding. The other part is bringing them up to speed with their projects. You know, giving them the information and the resources that they need to be set up for success. And we can talk through what that looks like or what someone would need to do this, and that. And that information or that insight would be a lot more clearer for us to talk through as we develop the job description with a clear understanding of what your prospective VISTA would be doing.
Right. And so we're moving on to the last question from that was submitted through registration. So if anyone has any other questions or comments, please add that to the chat. But this was a question coming from someone in rural Eastern North Carolina and was wondering if there is any technical assistance support in being able to fill out the application to host a VISTA.
Absolutely. So we are your technical assistants for filling out the application, because there is no application to fill out to host an AmeriCorps VISTA. We fill out a program application each year to bring VISTAs into North Carolina. And so the sites literally, you know, have the responsibility of getting their site ready for the VISTA, creating a job description for the VISTA, And, you know, acclimating and onboarding the VISTA are the site's responsibilities for bringing on a VISTA. And the application is not one. So no worries on that.
Yeah. So what I'm learning from this is if you have questions or you have a specific issue, like Marquita is the person to reach out to and find out more.
Yeah, it's I have, you know, I've been doing this for a few years and have collaborated and partnered with a lot of folks like Maggie and her team. And there is, you know, I don't know all the answers, but there's a wealth of knowledge in this quasi coalition that we have created, and in partnership with the regional offices as well. So.
Yep, I always say that if I don't know the answer to something, and I might not because it's a federal program, there are a lot of complexities,
Right.
and I will find out for you. I have people I can pull from. So
right.
So Marquita, I think it doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in. I guess I would just ask as a closing question, is there anything else that wasn't covered today that you want to make sure is lifted up, or any last advice you have for organizations thinking about hosting a VISTA?
Yeah, I want to stress, and this came out of the poll, is that, you know, people have trouble, are maybe stuck or concerned with getting started. And I want to emphasize the support that we, the collaborative, provide in helping organizations across the state get started. Don't be intimidated by that. You know, the hardest part about getting started in this format is shooting an email saying, hey, I'm interested in AmeriCorps VISTA, because we have worked and we are very intentional about making this very easy and seamless for nonprofits. I understand bandwidth issues. I understand all the complexities of that. And so my job and our organization's job is to make bringing a VISTA as easy and as simplified as possible for anyone that's interested.
Well, I've so enjoyed being guest facilitator today. Thank you so much, Marquita and team. And Marquita, I think I'll just pass it back off to you.
Sounds good. So thank you so much, Maggie, for joining, for hosting the call today. And thank everyone on the webinar for listening in today and for your good, insightful questions. Following this webinar, you're going to be receiving a survey to provide feedback later. Please take a moment to complete it. Please note our upcoming webinar. We've partnered with a communications firm to walk our members through video hosting techniques. And we'll explore from how our partners can adjust lighting to improve the visuals with their webinar presentations, to how to speak directly into the computer camera, to appropriately connect with clients, because I know a lot of you guys are serving clients online. And so if you're in, you know, I am excited about this because we're hosting obviously a lot of video calls, and I know that I have a lot to learn as well. So I hope you'll join me in learning for that webinar opportunity. And lastly, if you're interested in learning more about having a VISTA at your organization, please email me to schedule some time to talk. As I mentioned, we're at the height of VISTA recruitment season. So if you're interested in hosting a VISTA this year, contact me as soon as possible, preferably immediately after this webinar. If there are no more questions, and there does not look like there's any, I am going to say goodbye and thank you all for joining our webinar. And like I said, here's the link for additional questions. Thank you so much. This recording will be sent out to you later on. Thank you. You guys have a great day. Stay dry.